Welcome back to TSP. I'm Captain Paul. What's going on there?
Genius.
What's going on there, Dr. Evil Genius, man?
There's a lot of crazy stuff going on in the world, man. You hit me up today and told me you was doing a commentary by yourself, and I asked you, what were you making this commentary about?
Listen, I might as well call this "Fuck the Whites" show today, because this is a very interesting article I had to read. It was something I was bamboozled, so I was gonna do a commentary by myself, but you know, my co-host called me like, this would be a good. Let's just get together and collaborate on this. It's I thought it was a satire at first, and the more I read, the more depressed I got. So let's just get right into it. TheGrio has
first mistake. Let's talk about your first mistake. Your first mistake was clicking on TheGrio. That was your first mistake. Okay. TheGrio is like the black liberal version of Fox News.
Absolutely.
Neither one can be trusted for the same self-serving partisan bullshit. So that was your first mistake. But continue.
Well, TheGrio, written by Michael Harriot. Let's get into it. The white lash behind Minneapolis plan to fire white teachers explained. All right, let's get right into it. The conservatives at Fox News call it discrimination.
Whoa! Whoa! 1 second. Why'd they put that in quotations?
I mean,
if it was in the reverse, would they need the quotations?
Nope. They'd actually be called. It'd be inherently racist to have those quotations. So, just saying. The neo-Confederates at the Heritage Foundation said it violates Title VII of the Civil Rights Act and the Equal Protection Clause. A headline in the official digital outlet of what?
Whoa. Sorry, because did I see neo-Confederates?
Neo-Confederates.
Now, it's possible that the Heritage Foundation could be white supremacists, white nationalists. It's possible. I don't know what they do. But if this is the reason that you're calling them neo-Confederates, you're
definitely slanting your article in a certain way, and let's just call it how it is. You're being a bigot. So, a headline, the official digital outlet of white nationalism says. What is the official digital outlet of white nationalism? Hold on. I need to make sure. The Daily Signal. Okay, I don't know them, so maybe he's right, maybe he's wrong. I don't fucking care. Aren't we better than Minneapolis teachers unions fire whites first policy? I mean, I'm hoping that, the character, your content of your character be far greater than the color of your skin. I don't know. I don't know what you think, Evil. I'm just hoping we're at that point where we should be kind of judging people on their character and how good they are at the job. They are referring to the newest issue in the white outrage industrial complex, a contract between Minneapolis Public Schools and the Minneapolis Federation of Teachers. The conservative media has latched onto the plan as yet another example of rising oppression of Caucasian America. This is amazing. I'm going to have to start using this vernacular in my own personal day-to-day.
I mean, but the thing is, if what they're saying is true, because again, when you talk about these CBAs, you have to read the fine print, and you know how like people like to take stuff out of context to make it seem as if they're being victimized. But I really got to see what is this thing that is anti-white though. That's what I want.
Well, let's so. According to collective bargaining agreements, detractors MPS will target white teachers for layoffs to solve the past discrimination. Somehow, people who lack critical thinking skills and seasoning experience can be belied into believing a contract that was collectively bargained by a majority white coalition is anti-white. Perhaps they are willing to ignore the past discrimination part of the story. Maybe the outraged victims of this brand new act of reverse racism don't care that this contract is 4 months old. However, there is bigger issues with it. With the conservative narrative that should be included in the current conversation. Firing white teachers is a great idea. What the
in italics too.
Yo.
Allow me to explain. We don't have a choice. It's your fucking website.
Unfortunately, we have to keep pushing forward.
You gonna have make me look like Officer Tatum in this bitch. That ain't right.
First of all, why are teachers being laid off? Don't we need more teachers? Well, aside from the idea that most people believe that we need more teachers, the American education system also has a long-standing policy that we should pay teachers. And because most teachers prefer to be paid with money, a lack of school funding prevents Minneapolis public schools from paying all of its teachers.
How the hell is that the fucking teacher's fault?
I don't know, because this guy can't stay on the same so this would be the same guy if you had a conversation. We need to pay black teachers more. Pay them whites less. They get enough. They get all the I don't know. I don't know. It's a very interesting conversation. Why can't MPS afford to pay its teachers? School funding is typically predicted on the number of students enrolled. While the average school spends $13,494 per student, Minneapolis public schools spend $21,656 according to the National Education Statistics. But MPS has one of the highest declines in enrollment in the country. And because most unions make it very difficult to fire workers, the number of teachers stayed the same while the amount of money that paid teachers' salaries decreased. The shortfall necessitated low salaries, budget cuts, and school closures. It got so bad that MPS had an $86 million budget deficit. It was expected to become insolvent by 2024. The Minneapolis Federation of Teachers says that the district has more than enough money in its reserves to solve the problem. However, the district says that its rules won't allow the district to tap into those reserves. So in March 2022, the teachers union went on a strike for 3 weeks. The district couldn't just close schools, so they had to pay more teachers, which reportedly exacerbated the district's dire financial situation. When MPS received $175 million in federal COVID relief funds, the teachers union assumed the budget problem was fixed, but the district used most of the COVID funds to defray the costs incurred by the strike. On March 25th, the two sides reached a tentative agreement that included layoffs for excess teachers while providing protections for educators of color. In essence, the teachers will be laid off in order of seniority unless they are protected by the provisions that include, among other things, 1, educators in racially isolated schools with the greatest concentrations of poverty, number 2, members of underrepresented populations among district licensed teachers, 3, alumni of HBCUs, tribal colleges, Hispanic Association of Colleges, and university programs. That seems like the definition of reverse racism.
That's not reverse racism, because racism is racism.
Thank you. I hate that phrase. Reverse racism. It's so dumb.
There's no such thing as reverse racism.
No, you're just being racist. You're just
if you're making a policy that discriminates against a race in favor of another race, it's racism.
This would be the same dude that fucking makes a article and a documentary on redlining and how those practices are wrong and incorrect, and we should shut down those practices. But to just turn the blinders on because the skin is white, like we can't see the problem. We can't see the problem. It's just it's baffling.
Now let's take this from the bullet points, right? Because I do think that, and I'm trying to look at this from a reasonable person's perspective, right? Number one, educators in racially isolated schools with the greatest concentrations of poverty. I can tell you from experience that I got more support when I was living in extreme poverty here in New York City. I got more from the black teachers and the Hispanic teachers than I got from the white teachers. And I suspect that part of that is the fact that the white teachers could not really truly understand. And this is the 1990s now, right?
Right.
We're not in the fucked up situation that we're in today. But back in the 1990s, a lot of the white teachers just kind of saw the brain power that I had, but could not understand why I had behavioral problems and why I couldn't focus or didn't want to focus. Even though I had the fastest brain in most of the classrooms I've ever been in. Why didn't I not perform that way? See, the black teachers understood why. They knew that I was, being neglected at home. They knew that I was having, trouble getting meals outside of school. Like once I go home, the food is not going to be as readily available. They know that when they see me come into school with raggedy clothes on, that the situation at home is probably not good. So they were a little bit more caring about what I was going through rather than why I didn't sit down and shut up, or why I would score so high on all the exams but never do any of the homework, or sometimes not show up to class at all.
Well,
right? The black teachers understood. The black teachers were more supportive in those situations. The white people, they wanted to be supportive, but they never had any kind of reference because they didn't see these kinds of things coming up, especially in my neighborhood. So when they talk about racially isolated schools, we're talking about the most segregated, schools, with the schools that are getting the least amount of support from the property taxes. Usually property taxes that pay for your local schools. So if everybody in your neighborhood owns nothing, all of the property values are down because black people live there, it would make more sense in theory, and this is just me, it may make more sense in theory to make sure that the teachers that are there can somewhat identify with the students that are there. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and I think the problem though too, and it's unfortunate with your situation, is I think there needs to be a little bit more understanding, and I know they might not be able to directly understand, right, or be able to correlate with your situation or situations like yours in the past, but I think there needs to be more education with teachers of how to deal with very sensitive issues like that, right? I mean, I don't think that would be...
There's no education like experience, especially with like how I grew up, how fucked up I grew up. You cannot learn that in a book or in a seminar.
No, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying to be... obviously, you wouldn't be going through those same experiences, so you can't necessarily relate, but being sensitive to those, I don't think that's that hard of a concept to learn, right? Like, there's been friends of mine that have gone through things, but it's having a sensitivity of being like, all right, like, so what can I do to make you successful? You know what I mean? And that's where I'm coming from. They obviously can't relate to your life situation. I feel like that's... like everyone goes through life through different experiences, and some people go through life with much harsher experiences. But I mean, I can understand the premise of this. The problem is, and this is where we'll probably have to do more digging, is how many black people are going into education to become teachers. I mean, I'm not like we have a teacher shortage as it is right now in this country, and I think isolating a group of people that are teachers just because of the color of their skin is just going to make it that much harder to fill these the needs of these schools, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. And I think one of the reasons why that makes sense is because even if this policy had good reason to exist, right? You have to look at the cost benefit analysis of putting a policy in place that might actually be good, but if it's not properly received by the populace, then a lot of the value from the principles of that policy are already lost. It's dead on arrival.
Yeah. I think it's like, I think there's good ideas with this, but I also think like there's problems with the education system with teacher unions where they keep people with seniority that probably should just have retired like 10 years ago, in my opinion, right?
People just a shitty black teacher gets kept on and they let go of a good white teacher. That would be, oh my God.
And that's the point I was going to bring up, right? Is I feel like teachers have to have some form of kind of standard. You know what I mean? I know, putting grades isn't always the perfect situation because each individual child can be different. But there needs to be some better form of standardization so we can kind of judge how good or how effective a teacher is. Because there has been teachers that I have dealt with throughout my life that were completely inept at their jobs. And, you know, I've had really good white teachers, really good black teachers. I've had really good, really bad white teachers and really bad black teachers. It really just kind of came down to that individual person. So, like, let's say this is like all hunky dory. They go through with this, and seems like it actually seems like it's already in there in effect, right? Like you said, you could have a black teacher with seniority that is terrible at their job and hates kids stay compared to a younger white teacher that might love their job and really likes to help and make these kids learn and get like really engrossed into the material. And I think it's just a dangerous precedent. And I don't one of the biggest problems I have with the school unions is the whole tenure thing, right? I get, like, you know, you've done your time, you've done your thing, but it's like, I don't believe a teacher should just be there and just keep their job if they're doing really poorly just because they've been there for 30 years. Like, it's some of these people need to move on after a certain period of time. Well, at least in my opinion.
You can offer your counter to that argument that you're going to understand. Who is most likely going to show up blaring on a big megaphone about their alternative sexual lifestyle? A younger teacher or an older teacher?
Younger teacher.
Right. So,
no, I'm not saying to kick the older teachers out. I'm just saying, like, I'm using the extreme example of an older teacher that just don't give a shit, doesn't really like do their classes, doesn't really care.
But I think that should be it. It doesn't matter if you're an older teacher or a younger teacher. Do you give a fuck about your students, or do you just really care about pronouns and whatever your political affiliation is, the left or the right? Do you really care about making sure that these kids know how to read and do math? Do you? I mean, that's what I care about.
That should be the most important thing. And I agree. Some of these new age teacher that like over sexualize themselves to their classroom is kind of fucking weird. Yeah. So let's get into it. Why would they agree to that? Well, first you need to do a few hard facts, not just facts, hard facts. According to almost every study, black and non-white students have better educational, emotional, and behavioral outcomes in classrooms with same-race teachers, something that you kind of even touched upon. In Minneapolis public schools, black and Hispanic students are more likely to be disciplined and less likely to graduate. Fewer than 1 in 10 pass the state math test, and only 1 in 5 can read at grade level. Minneapolis public school students are 37% white, 34% black, and 17% Hispanic. The staff of MPS is 66% white, 17.9% black, and 6.4% Hispanic.
All right, so 1 second. So, and again, this is assuming that the numbers are not skewed to fit a narrative.
Yeah.
Right? Let's just say these numbers are correct. If you're saying that the outcomes are better with same race teachers, right?
Mm-hmm.
It would stand to reason that in some of the richer areas, you're not going to force black teachers into those places, and you wouldn't want that.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah, that's exactly where you could say that, where it's like, okay, so if in a white community there should be no black teachers. That's his line of thinking. But
would it also sound like it makes sense if we said we don't need a whole bunch of black teachers in a 97% white school district?
Yeah, pretty much.
So if we can agree to that, then we can agree to what this guy's saying.
I mean, I don't necessarily agree with that viewpoint, because I think if you base things on statistics alone, yeah, maybe it goes that way. But I've had some incredible teachers that were black and Hispanic that
but understand what I'm saying. You don't want, and if you have a school district with this where the students are 97% white, mm-hmm. and there are a lot of communities like that in the United States, right?
Mm-hmm.
And almost all the teachers are white. You would not support them just forcing in black and Hispanic teachers in a situation like that, especially if the kids are getting the outcomes that you already need. There's no reason to force blackness on these white kids in these school districts. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
So I'm saying if it makes sense in that scenario, then it should also make sense in opposite scenario, where
but my counter argument to
force white teachers into a minority, especially when you're talking about the severely impoverished areas. The more impoverished area it is, the less likely you're going to find racial heterogeny.
My counter to that though is there enough black teachers? I mean that. Is there enough black teachers? Because I'll be blunt, I know people that have taught in the inner city, have taught in rough areas. The reason why white teachers go there, and they're generally younger, is because they can't fill the spots. They can't find enough people, whether Hispanic, black, or any different type of minority, to fill those teacher spots. Is there enough black teachers? Now, if there is, fine, go ahead and fill them that quota. But I mean, overwhelmingly, there usually isn't. I mean, I'm just spitting the cold truth with that. There is not enough black teachers in America to fill that need.
Well, the next bullet point, I don't know if this is going to adjust your view on it at all, but it says, the district and the teachers union acknowledge, quote, past discrimination by the district disproportionately impacted the hiring of underrepresented teachers in the district as compared to the relevant labor market and the community, and resulted in a lack of diversity of teachers. So if they're admitting that they had an anti-black, anti-Hispanic tinge to their hiring in the past, and that impacted that 66% white, 17.9% black. So in a perfect world where what you said makes a lot of sense, where it's like, well, there aren't that many black teachers. Well, they're admitting that they would have had higher than 18% black teachers if they were not actively discriminating against black teachers in the first place.
I mean, if there has been past discrimination, and I'd have to really kind of look into that and kind of further. But if the union is acknowledging, let's just go on the premise that this is correct, then yes, that should be shouted out, and you should hire people, like I've always said, based on how good they are at the job or their potential outcome, and that's it. I don't really give a fuck about a skin color. Right. I mean, if they're really good black teachers, hire them. Right. But I'm just saying, from my own worldview, from people that have been in the education field, is generally in those areas it's harder to fill. I mean, in lower income areas, it's harder to fill those teachers positions. It just is.
Especially right now.
So it's like in a world where there is such a small. I would say there's so underwhelming amount. Like, there's not enough teachers. I feel like kind of isolating people just because of the skin color is a little bit crazy. But yeah, we should shout down anything that is discriminatory or racist. And if that did indeed happen in the past, that should be condemned. But I don't think by making something or a clause like this within a contract so you can just lay off people due to their skin color really fixes that issue. You just kind of flip it around and be like, oh, you know what? Instead of being discriminatory against Hispanics or blacks, let's just be discriminatory towards whites. I mean, like, don't, you know what I mean? Like, just be like a fucking, two wrongs don't make a right.
Absolutely. So, and you look here at the program, and it says, as you can see, for most of its existence, the district's hiring policy not only favored white teachers, but it did so to the detriment of its non-white students. But for some reason, Fox News pundits and right-wing propagandists don't seem interested in this part of the story. But we here on TSP, we are interested in this part of the story. And guess what? I still say it is wrong to include a clause in the teachers union contract that is going to be 100% guaranteed racially inflammatory.
Absolutely.
And
yeah,
how do you fix something like this? And Captain Paul, my buddy right here, Captain Paul, he said it. You don't fix it by discriminating against the socially acceptable group to discriminate against. What you do is you change your fucking hiring practices.
I mean, go figure.
Change your hiring practices. Make sure that you're not seeing that, this is a black looking name. Let me throw this resume in the trash because this is a black looking name. No, cut all of that look at the qualifications. You know, do the background check to make sure that, you know, they were good in the last place that they worked at, and you let them work. And if you get the desired results, thumbs up. If you don't, look in another direction. But you don't fix discrimination with discrimination. Could you imagine if I said, "Yo, Captain Paul, man, I really want to stop boats capsizing. So I'm gonna capsize all the canoes."
Yo, I mean,
what kind of fucking sense would that make?
It doesn't make much. It doesn't make much sense at all. And let's kind of dig into this. So, he actually said, okay, maybe teachers discriminated in the past, but going forward, shouldn't they just fire the worst teachers? I mean, that makes kind of fucking sense. That's a great point, and most people won't argue with. Now, here's a question: why do you assume white teachers aren't the worst teachers? Oh man. That's just like a deflective thing. All right. Most of MPS students are non-white. Most of the teachers are white. According to the district's own data, most of the non-white students are lagging behind the white students. And according to people who know things, I mean, who are these people? Students of color do better when they're taught by educators of color. So I'm not assuming the white teachers are the worst teachers. I'm assuming that most teachers are less equipped to teach most of the students. If you're going to fire teachers, why not use fact-based, peer-reviewed information? There is no segment in the entirety of the American social construct where ignoring factual information regarding is wrong. Using racial data seems to be okay when it doesn't affect people who like guitar solos.
I like guitar solos. What the fuck are you talking about?
This is a weird one. Black people are more likely to be arrested for illegal drugs, even though white people are more likely to use and distribute them. The U.S. Supreme Court said racial...
false. That's actually false. It's half true. Black people are more likely to be arrested for illegal drugs, even though white people use drugs and distribute them at the same rates. White people don't use drugs at higher rates than black people. It's the same across the board.
I mean, we've even gone into that with the whole, you know, not to make a kind of non-sequitur, like not to make a non-relevant point here, but we even did a show earlier about with the arrest records and stuff like that.
Right.
On percentage base. Like, you can say numbers based, more. No, everyone gets like arrested at the same rate, pretty much.
No, that's not true. That's not true. It's like if you look at the stop and frisk here in New York City, which was like a really, like the DOJ and the FBI had to get New York City stop doing it. Even though whites and blacks have the same likeliness to use marijuana, 83% of the arrests here in New York City when it came to stop and frisk.
No. So like when we did
marijuana, remember, in New York City, we're black, even though whites and blacks use at the same rates.
Remember when we did the FBI statistics, and this was a while ago, but people of various different skin tones, remember like when we looked into violent crimes or certain acts, it was generally overall...
Oh yeah, violent crimes are different, but they're talking about being arrested for illegal drugs. And what I'm saying is that's only half right.
I'm just saying people commit these acts at the same rate per population. It's not like one race.
It's usually along a poverty line. It's usually along economic situation, not on race. So you're right in that. But here, it was saying more likely to be arrested for illegal drugs, which is nonviolent, even though white people are more likely to use and distribute them. Not true. They are even across the board. Now, black people are more likely to be arrested by probably a factor of 5. That is true. But to say that white people use more drugs per capita than black people, that's cap. That's false. Black people and white people use and distribute drugs at about the same rate.
Well, because I'm actually kind of would want to, we can go into that later, but the U.S. Supreme Court racially profiling is constitutionally agreed that the law enforcement officers can ask Spanish speakers to show their immigration papers. When it comes to whiteness, it must be.
Don't even. That they're just throwing that in there for more fake outrage.
Yeah.
Stupid.
Yeah, and you are right. It is 5 times. Okay, I just want to make sure of that. So you were right.
We're talking about non-violent crimes.
Yeah. I was talking. I was referring the one we had about violence. So that was my apologies. Yeah. So, will this make the Minneapolis public schools better? Maybe. But what could possibly worse than majority of MPS students not being proficient in math and reading? What's financially worse than total insolvency? What's less equitable than total financial, educational, and inequality? Minneapolis public schools.
Don't even read the rest of it because it's not worth our fucking time. But here. You know what this article does not like really zero in on? The fact that the education budget should not be cut in the fucking first place.
Yep.
You got all of this money going to prisons, jails, the criminal court system. This is an area that if you pump money into this, you can lower crime rates and you can lower the need for more police. You can lower the need for more jails. Why are we all missing the fucking point? You want it to be white teachers versus TheGrio and all this garbage. This garbage.
I have to end it with this because it's a bunch of garbage and all this shit. So let me just who wants to live in a world filled with mediocre people who are bad at their job? Unless, of course, you're white in Minneapolis.
But that's not even what they were saying.
No, Michael Harriot is a writer, cultural critic, and championship level spades player, and that joke writes itself. So, all right, I'm sorry, that is just absolute. Get the best educators. I don't feel like that's a difficult thing to do.
Right.
Get the best people.
The thing is, again, he's pandering to his base, right? But we're light on good faith argument. And I think a lot of these people, they think, well, if Fox News is not going to make a good faith argument, then we need our own brand of bad faith argument. It doesn't help anybody.
No, it doesn't. It just makes it
truth and all that. Like, it doesn't help.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't help, and it makes it far worse. And it's like, I think it is kind of comical in a way with TheGrio. They're openly mocking Fox News, but yet they do not see the hilarity within itself that they are just the flip opposite of Fox News, or flip position of Fox News. They are everything they say that they are against. And that article written by that writer,
I've been railing against this for a long time. Why I don't really support pro anything. Because everybody's coming to the table with a disingenuous argument, and it makes it very difficult for me to engage in dialogue with people on either side, because both sides are bringing partial truth. So I'm trying to interact with the part that's true, but then I can't fully rely on whoever's reporting it, because they're probably either adding something into it that's not true, or they're misrepresenting something that is true.
Yeah, and I think the biggest problem here is that I see, and this happens with a lot of like social media and website, everything, since media has gone really online, and it's independent in a lot of ways. Some way it's not, because you have PACs, super PACs funding certain organizations. It is kind of discouraging in a way that people will kind of purposely mislead or kind of use half truths to kind of get a point across. Like this would be the same person that, like, everyone's against, like people like Alex Jones, right, who like use a sliver of truth but a lot of incorrect information to try to prove some weird fucking point. And to me, it should kind of come down to reporting the facts and kind of going from there. And if you have to purposely mislead people within your article to prove your point, you've already failed as a journalist. You should be trying to get to the truth and trying to get to the core of the issue. What a better article would have been is if he actually did go into, looked at the, I don't know how you would do, but the effective rate of these teachers and like the age brackets, like do a huge study or a huge, research into seeing who is the most productive. I don't know exactly how you would go about doing that, but I think that'd be far more productive instead of just like, you know what? Let's just hire the white people, and this problem isn't an issue because it's not against blacks. That's what this comes off of. This just comes off as self-righteousness and lack of self-awareness. And to me, it's just kind of comical in a way. It kind of is.
I'm a little skeptical, because I come from a place that tried to standardize how you judge teachers. And what ends up happening is, and we just saw this not too long ago with a bunch of teachers who, and shout out to Leto's Law, because he is where I got the story from, Steve Leto, who is kind of like an automotive attorney in Michigan, right? And he was talking about how a lot of these teachers are facing charges, like real bad charges, because they were helping the students to cheat. They were directing the students to cheat on standardized tests because each teacher got a bonus for every kid that passed, and the school got a bonus for every kid that passed.
Hey,
So you're not paying them the way that they need to be paid in the first place, right? And then I come from a place where I know that teachers, when faced with standardization, you're basically, especially talking about broke teachers, if they're giving bonuses away to teachers who get the kids to pass, then they're going to stop teaching and it's going to start teaching tests, or worse, getting them to cheat on these tests. So I've seen this at play when I was in high school. I've seen this at play in my adulthood, looking at different school districts and how they handle grading teachers. And I'm very skeptical that putting them under some sort of arbitrary number system, if that's going to play out well.
No, you're not wrong, because I feel like when you put a system like that where it's incentive based, like, come on, this isn't a pro athlete sport. Like, there shouldn't be incentive basis in someone's fucking salary. That's kind of absurd. I do see your worry, but there needs to be some type of way where we can judge the effectiveness of teachers, and that's why I say kind of maybe you go over a few year period. You know what I mean? Maybe average out, because each case is going to be different. Maybe you have a year where students just maybe don't grasp the material even how hard you teach, but I do think we need to find some form of, not necessarily just complete standardization, because that does lie itself to problems when you're like, well, if they don't hit this certain mark, then I'm not getting that's dumb. That's not how it should go. But we need to have some form of peer review or review that we can kind of look at and be like, okay, you're doing well here, bad here, what can you do to improve? Because one of the biggest problems that I've seen with some educators is that instead of evolving and improving over time, they just like get into it their way or the highway, instead of like learning other methods to teach to reach different types of learners. So different types of
one of the bullet points that we both agree on that should not be on the list on how we should judge teachers and grade teachers is what race they check off on government forms.
Absolutely. We here at the Talking Shit Podcast, man, we come here with the hot takes, but the cold truths. Trying to bring you guys information from every type of viewpoint and kind of give our breakdown on it. I'm Captain Paul. That's Dr. Evil Genius.
Evil Genius. And we're signing off this biatch.
We'll see you in the next one.